Cory, you ready to pop in?
Here.
All right. Welcome. This is Cory Klippsten. For those of you who don't know, he is the Swan founder and CEO. Michael, thanks for sticking around with us for a little Bitcoin session, jam session here. Cory, you wanna take it away and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So we've got you as the first shoe to drop. Thanks for your contribution to the world of Bitcoin. And then we had Jack, who was possibly spurred on by you. And then this morning, it's a little bit of a different category because it's not necessarily an operating business, but we saw the NYDIG, I think it's Digital Investment Group, announced that they put $100 million worth of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, which I thought was another really interesting development, especially given that this is actually the group that was rumored over the summer to be selling by far the highest volume of out of the money calls and then shorting the absolute crap out of Bitcoin with leverage whenever it tried to punch through like 12.5. So we've been talking about this in our own channels for the last few months and just kind of like wondering when they would say, okay, that risk is not worth taking anymore and flip long. My suspicion is that it's exactly what happened over the past week or so. I tweeted out last week that I thought they probably went neutral or net long. And then now the announcement comes out this morning, which I think is just them essentially trying to juice the position that they've already put on, which is going super long. And it's not just the 100 million on the balance sheet. They've also got, a few $1 billion, $1 or $2 billion in this fund that they put positions on with. So I don't know, man. I think you've started something here, Michael. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll say for the record, it was pretty clear that something got started long before I came along. Quite clear. I think that Satoshi and the early advocates, Hal Finney and the like, they started a fire in cyberspace, and I think it was a small one, and I think there was a massive civil war in 2017 that was fought by a bunch of Bitcoin maximalists, and the rest, along with a lot of other struggles and fireworks, and I think most of the world wasn't really understanding nor paying attention. But I think the success of Bitcoin was assured, first by the founders, because otherwise it'd be nothing, and then by the maximalists who won that war, and when they got to the hard forks. And by the time 2020 came along, it was pretty clear that the fire was raging. Bitcoin was the winning digital monetary system. And I feel fortunate that I kind of had 2020 hindsight. I had the benefit of everybody doing all the work and all of the bricks were in place. I just had the problem, right? I was motivated by getting kicked in the back of the head by this pandemic, and currency crisis. And so I had to discover it for myself, but I think that what you're seeing is a lot of other people that are just rational actors that are waking up in 2020, and they're not the heroes, they're not the visionaries. It's visionary when you're sitting around and Hal Finney's writing his notes in 2010. That's visionary. And when in 2017 or 2016, you're going through a hard fork with Bitcoin Cash and SV, that's terrifying, like fight to the bitter death. And at that point, had that fight been lost, right, none of us are here. At this point, this is what I say to people a lot is, it doesn't seem that hard to me. You see one company, you see one network, Bitcoin, with 93 or 94% hash rate dominance in the proof of work networks. Everybody else is 2% or 1% of that. It's not a terribly difficult conclusion to come to or analysis to come to. I think people just have to shake themselves out of their standard behavioral patterns and move into something new and different.
When you were falling down the rabbit hole, we ask Bitcoiners about this all the time on our podcasts and share the experience, the visceral experience of it. I'd love to hear you talk about the moments that you realized, what exactly was going on here, just the experience you had as a person when you were falling down the rabbit hole.
I can't say there's any one particular moment. I think it's hard to put my finger on any one moment. I wouldn't say. I think there's so many good pieces of content and so many good materials that have been created by such a wide range of Bitcoiners that each one of them is part of the mosaic that causes you to come to a conclusion. So I don't have a strong opinion on that. By the way, I do have a strong opinion on something else we talked about, which is inflation. And my observations, I don't think we're ever going to see inflation. There's again this macroeconomic talk about when will inflation come. Well, from what I can see, the core inflation metrics in Europe and in the United States, they both exclude energy and food. So if the EU can calculate an inflation metric without energy and food, and if the US calculates inflation metrics without energy and food, because they say they're highly volatile, which I think that means is because they go up in price. But in what universe that you expect to live in do you expect to be able to live without food and without energy? And so if the metric excludes food and energy, and if it also excludes every asset, every luxury asset, and it excludes annuities and excludes bonds and excludes stocks and excludes dividends and excludes everything scarce and rare and excludes all of the labor intensive activities and all high end services and every highly desirable painting you ever saw or sculpture. And if what's left, right? I think that the government agencies will just continually redefine the market basket of elements to include streaming videos and manufactured low variable cost items, and there will never be any inflation. Does anybody really think that streaming YouTube videos are ever going to go up no matter how much the Fed prints?
It's a good point.
It won't happen. People keep waiting for the hyperinflation. There won't be a hyperinflation, right? But if you wanted hyperinflation, the hyperinflation is $1 million bond that costs $10 million today, which means you've got 22% inflation on an annuity for the last every year for a decade. And so if every macroeconomist ignored 22% inflation and the single most important thing in the world for a decade running, why would you think that they're going to discover 2% inflation sometime in the next 10 years? And let me say it a different way. A bond that yields $50,000 a year is a lifetime annuity, right? It is a retirement. It is an early retirement. It used to cost $1 million to retire early, never work again in your life. And now it costs $10 million. So therefore, the single most important thing in the world, in my opinion, wouldn't it be to live comfortably forever without working? Don't you think that if you took a vote and you said, what does everybody want? And the answer is, I'd like to retire comfortably with full security for the rest of my life and never have to work again and never have to worry about it. That's what my father got after 30 years in the Air Force or 40 years in government service. You get a pension, right? You get a retirement benefit. So the single most important thing to go into a consumer basket would be an annuity or a comfortable retirement. And that's the one thing that is hyperinflating. If you think that 22% inflation is hyper, and no one's discovered it yet because no one's looking there. So I don't think they're ever going to find it. And I think it's kind of silly to say that, well, wait and see what happens when the Fed finally gets hyperinflation, because they won't.
A flip side of the yield on these bonds going to the floor is now there's this opportunity for companies to take extremely cheap debt onto their balance sheet and essentially, pull off the best carry trade in the history of humanity. I was just talking with management of a private company, a large Asian private company that has a big operating business, and they've been doing this already. So they are, they have loaded up on cheap, 1% debt or 2% debt and bought a ton of Bitcoin on the quiet. But, it's not that surprising. Why wouldn't you?
Well, it's been a classic in the currency market. It used to be that when the yen had a very low interest rate, people would fund in yen and they would use it to buy dollars because there's a 2.5% spread. And, the only issue is just, do you think the yen is going to strengthen or weaken, right? And so if Bitcoin is just another currency, then in fact you've got the ability potentially to fund in euros or fund in dollars or fund in yen and carry it in Bitcoin. And you're right. I mean, the equivalent for, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. I said, Bob, why don't you mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin with it? Like the obvious thing to do is refinance your real estate at very low interest rate. You can refinance less than 3%, buy Bitcoin, and you could get something. If you think you're going to get more than 3% on Bitcoin and you're going to pay less than 3% on your house, then you're basically funding in dollars and investing in Bitcoin. And they're interesting ideas. They all just come down to matters of conviction and wherewithal.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, you've hinted at it, right? At some point, it just becomes a rational thing. And then, you've had to take the jump by building extreme levels of conviction and then making sure that all of the interests around you were aligned and had, approaching your level of conviction to pull it off. But at some point, it just becomes the right trade. And some people already recognize that. Like, I have a lot of friends, from the finance and trading worlds that have, even long ago just made that asymmetric bet. I've got a friend with a few thousand Bitcoins, who still thinks that it might be MySpace and Facebook might be around the corner, but he's made the bet just because the risk reward is so asymmetric. So when that really starts to take off as well, they just start to fuel each other because it just starts to confirm the people with conviction that they were right. And then the traders see the gains and, it just fuels itself.
Yeah, I think with regard to portfolio theory, if I have $100 million and I put 33 million of it into gold and I put 33 million of it into big tech and I put 33 million into Bitcoin, right? If you think that Bitcoin is going to move with the expansion of the monetary supply, and if you plug in a number, let's say you plugged in 15%, and this is where it gets real. If you thought the monetary supply was going to expand at 15%, well, Bitcoin's scarce, which means that you're looking at a 15% advantage or 15% real yield there if nothing else changes, right? If the other drivers of Bitcoin would be adoption, technical utility, productivity of the people in the network, et cetera. But throw those out and just focus upon just the relationship between the monetary supply that is trading and say it inflates at 15%. Now go to technology stocks or go to any stock. If the stock is based upon or predicated upon revenues which drive cash flows in a given currency, if the revenues are growing 3%, and the cash flows are growing 3%, and the monetary supply is expanding 15%, you've got a minus 12% yield. You have to actually be invested in a company that's growing its cash flows north of 15% to be flat. And of course, most of the S&P and most equities aren't going to be growing more than 15%. So there are two conditions then. I got to find a company that's growing its cash flows north of 15%, and I have to buy it at a fair price. And if I miss on either of those two, right, that's a problem for equities. For gold, you've got a minus 3% or a 3% dilution or debasement from mining and rehypothecation and the counterparty risk. You would say you ought to put in a 2 to 3 or 2 to 4% a year load on that. So now you start to look at your entire portfolio and you say, are you really going to put 1% of your portfolio into Bitcoin at plus 15 and 99% into stocks at -5 or -10 because I think no one expects cash flows to grow that much this year, right?
No, so I listened to your Peter McCormick interview this morning. Looking forward to part 2 dropping. You talked about how you've decided to fund a Bitcoin developer, which I think is awesome, and I hope happens more as companies, corporations, and bigger investors get some skin in the game, and they can pick up the tab for a developer or two to just focus on Bitcoin, 100%. Wondering if you have thought yet about going into mining, either personally or through the company, running some of those cyber hornets yourself.
I think with all of these things, especially when you're a public company, you have to rationally and prudently do all of your diligence and do your research and become educated on the economics and the options and the legal and regulatory issues, and then the capital risk issues. And after you've cycled through all that, you can come to a conclusion. With regard to supporting Bitcoin and Bitcoin development, right now I'm going through an educational process where I'm educating myself, and the company is getting educated on everybody in the space, everything that's being done, everything that needs to be done, how we can support it, and how we should best move forward. And I'm really excited about that. I mean, I have inclinations, but it's early in my education there, and the company's education. So we have to absorb more. I think with regard to mining, I think it's the same thing. We just have to absorb more and understand all the dynamics. And I don't have any other thoughts on that.
What about thoughts in your studies on Bitcoin mining and energy usage? Has that been a concern for you?
Am I concerned about the use of energy in Bitcoin mining? No, actually, I've referred to. I feel like Bitcoin is protected by a wall of encrypted energy, and the fact that there's a lot of energy involved, I think, is a good thing. It creates security to the network. If we had 12 servers with 12 stakes of some random coin on them, and we were trusting those 12 servers to protect $200 billion, I would think that's much riskier. I think I'm not really interested in finding quick, elegant, cheap shortcuts to protecting all the money in the world. And I think it's kind of a silly notion to be concerned about the use of energy in Bitcoin mining. As I said before, first of all, it's coming at off the marginal points of the grid. The only places people are doing Bitcoin mining are places where there's power that's in excess, that has where the highest marginal utility of the power is Bitcoin mining. If human beings were willing to pay more, then they would price the Bitcoin miners out of the market. And so every place where we need electricity or we need energy for either factories or human welfare, the price is high enough that Bitcoin miners are driven away from that. Bitcoin miners go to the end of the earth, to the end of the grid, and they're using energy that would have otherwise been wasted. It's either wasted hydroelectric energy or, for example, natural gas wells that are about to be closed in, and they either have to close them in or flare them, and they can set up Bitcoin mining rigs there. So I think they're recycling marginal energy in order to create a digital monetary system that's capable of holding all the money on Earth. And so what's wrong with that idea? I can't figure that out. It seems totally rational to me. And compare, what's the cost of protecting all the money on the Earth if we don't do it this way?
Yeah, I mean, it's incalculable. We can't know for sure. You can make rough guesses, but it's a lot. I think it is a good deal by comparison for sure. I mean, it's got to be more efficient.
Yeah, I think, there are critics and skeptics of Bitcoin, and sometimes they'll throw the energy thing in your face. But again, I think it's a silly notion. And then there are skeptics there's the quantum computer argument. People keep talking about, well, what if they come up with a quantum computer? And I think it's kind of like, well, and of what if a human being comes up with the unstoppable weapon, and what if he uses it against us in particular? Well, if you really invent a quantum computer, 99.9% of the money is somewhere else. And why don't you just take over a country or stop the human race in its track or steal anything you want from anybody, any which way you want to do it with your quantum computer, because you could, in theory. So as a practical matter, what's more likely to happen, it seems, is computing power is going to get more powerful. Computers are going to get more powerful. And the people that have the biggest vested interest in harnessing computer power are going to be Bitcoin miners. And they're going to upgrade their mining rigs with whatever advances we have in computer power in order to make the network more secure and to the benefit of Bitcoin. And I think, somebody thinks, oh, I invented a genie and the genie can cast a magic spell and I'm really worried they're going to attack Bitcoin with it. Well, if I have a genie that can bend space and time, I think they might do other things with it too. There's a lot more stuff to do with infinite godlike power than attack 0.01% of the world.
Yeah, and we've got really smart people working on, quantum resistant cryptography already. So it's being worked on and thought about.
Hey, Michael, we have a really close friend of the company and a lot of us personally, Robert Breedlove, who's based here in SoCal, where some of us are, and obviously is becoming quite the Bitcoin philosopher. We understand you've recently spent quite a bit of time with him. I just wanted to get some thoughts and reflections on kicking around.
Robert's awesome.
Yeah,
and I love his work, and I think he's consciousness expanding. He's gotten people to stretch their minds in lots of different dimensions, and I think that's wonderful. I think Robert's one of the great intellectual leaders in the Bitcoin space, and he's one of the people that makes it a joy to be in this industry.
Expanding on that a little bit, have you seen any sort of commonalities about people that have found Bitcoin and gone down the rabbit hole and come out the other side, both as far as what type of people come into it and then also maybe what Bitcoin does to them, in terms of, being members of society or being sort of professionals or whatever it is? What is a Bitcoiner, I guess I'm asking?
I would say there's a consortium of free thinkers, libertarians, intellectuals, good economists, by the way. People would say Austrian economists, but I would just say good economists, right? Because it seems like there's so much bad economic thinking, right? So thoughtful economists, thoughtful scientists, right? There's a lot of ideas in Bitcoin that are simply things that you learn in thermodynamics, right? Closed system thermodynamics or mechanical systems or engineering. You ever design an airplane or a ship or a heat exchanger, right? I mean, concepts like adiabatic lapse and isolated systems and conservation of mass and energy. All of those things pop up. So great scientists, great philosophers, great thinkers, great economists, great technologists, people that love software, people believe in liberty, right? People that believe in math and truth and integrity. I mean, there's all of those things. It reminds me of that. What is the T-shirt where it just says "Because math"? Because math, right? So. Yeah, I went, when I was at MIT, it reminds me of my freshman year at MIT. And freshman year, and probably it's the same at a lot of schools, Hal Finney went to Caltech, right? I bet it was the same at Caltech too. And I bet it's the same in a lot of great universities. But you show up for your hometown, and you were the smart kid in your hometown, and you were kind of the nerd or the valedictorian, and you were the person that read deep books and talked about ideas, and people looked at you and they're like, but you don't play soccer, you're going to homecoming, and say that again, I'll kick your ass, right? And then you go off to college, and you get to college, and I got to MIT, and it was like everybody was valedictorian, and everybody had perfect scores in the SATs, and they were all the smartest person in their town. And then they start talking, like, oh my God, these people have so many interesting ideas. Like, they've been everywhere, they thought about everything. One of my roommates built robots, for fun. And my other roommate designed a video game competing with Pac-Man and got a cease and desist letter from Atari for stealing all of the revenue. So he thought it was kind of funny to launch his own pirate video games. And another one had started his own. One of them was Pete Diamandis. He started the International Space University. And they were all change the worlders, or the other guy be like, come, we're going gliding. What do you mean? Oh, yeah, we're going flying. What? Or the next one's like, we're going to do space shuttle stuff. Or one of my fraternity brothers, for fun, he went and he hacked all the elevators at MIT. So if you punched the third floor, you went to the roof, and you punched the roof, you went to the basement. And the other one figured out back in the day when phone calls cost you a lot of money. They figured out how to hack the phone system, and he called his girlfriend in Malaysia for free for like a year, and eventually got busted for $48,000 worth of phone bills.
Phone freaking. I didn't think we'd talk about phone freaking today.
Just interesting people, and you got there and you're like, these are just my kind of people. They're just my kind of people. They're inventing stuff. They're inventing Project Athena came out of MIT. And they're inventing carburetor. I remember they came into my fraternity and they knocked holes in all our walls and they wired it for Ethernet back in 1985. And we were getting our own workstations. And there was just a sense that, the world was going to change and we're going to use our brains to make it a better place. And that's what I see with Bitcoin. A lot of people thinking for themselves, using technology and math to do good things for the world.
So I love this. So obviously we're aware of the people that you've talked to, on camera or on podcasts. Are there any of the scientists in Bitcoin or the hardcore coders that you've gotten the chance to talk to, the Adam Backs of the world, or people that have been around, kicking around and, contributing to Core?
I'm starting to make my way through Bitcoin Core and the Bitcoin development community, and I'm going down that rabbit hole, if you will, and learning about how they do what they do and what their priorities are, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm enjoying that a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine the way you're talking about being able to scratch that itch on the tech side. It's got to be a big part of this for you. So we've had a little game we've been playing about the FAMGA companies and which one is most likely to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet first. So Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. Which one do you think would go first and why? We'll put pressure on them the way you did Jack.
That was the Cyber Hornets giving him a constructive nudge.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What is the word? A cheerful nudge. It could be anybody. I mean, there are arguments to be made in favor of Microsoft, and I've read those. And then I've heard other theories that Facebook is a logical one because of their mission of inclusiveness for the world. I think when we came out with our announcement, right, and we said Bitcoin is a fine treasury reserve asset for a publicly traded company, right? We kind of opened up some space for another publicly traded company to put it on its balance sheet. And then when Jack came out with his announcement, he said, this is an instrument of economic empowerment. And I think that is just as important, if not more important, in creating some a halo and air cover and a precedent for the next company. So you got to ask the question, what's the next big tech company that would like to be a proponent of economic empowerment for the world?
So, yeah, we're finding out very quickly. Obviously, Bitcoiners are very fond of making memes and understand the power of memes. And we talk about the great money meme wars of the 2020s. You've already become such you're a meme yourself, which is pretty fun, but you've also been the source of some great fodder for memes. Like the turn of phrase is really, really important. I was just actually listening quickly to, it sounded like you had a new list of 4 in a category, something that started with an A that you were ticking off on Peter's show. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, I'm not quite
I'll
sure.
I'll have to go back and listen to it again.
Yeah,
it's okay.
I said a lot of stuff.
Yeah, no, it was a nice new framework. We'll go grab it and tweet it out. Yeah, I was hoping it was something new you were coming up with. But yeah, the Cyber Hornets is great.
I referred to an arc of encrypted energy to escape the flood. That was one of my latest metaphors that I think is apropos for people that have no other way out. And I think it aligns well with Jack Dorsey's phrase, instrument of economic empowerment.
Yeah.
He said it his words were very eloquent, right? Eloquent and elegant. And I think they struck a chord with a lot of people. And at the end of the day, you got to decide, if you're not going to do this because you think it's the rational investment strategy, why don't you do this because it's good for the world and there's 1 billion people that have no choice or have no hope otherwise, and there's 5 billion people that will benefit by the support of Bitcoin as an instrument for economic empowerment.
There's been when people have pressed me and said, like, well, let's not try to make the price go up too high so we can stack more sats for ourselves or whatever. To me, I always go back to just one thing that Andreas Antonopoulos said, 5 or 6 years ago on one of his videos, which I'm sure you watched, which was basically if Bitcoin adoption spreads fast enough that we can head off one incident of hyperinflation in any country in the world and save the people of whatever that nation is from going through that, you actually have a moral obligation to spread Bitcoin adoption as fast as you possibly can. It's something that we certainly feel very, acutely at Swan. It's why we're doing what we're doing. We're trying to make it happen as fast as possible, trying to get to 10 million, sort of hardcore Bitcoiners in the US as fast as we can. Do you feel, it sounds like you do empathize with that at least, but do you actually feel a bit of a moral obligation to make it happen or try to make it happen?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I talked on McCormick's show about my experience in Argentina, and I have operations in Argentina, in Brazil, I have in Mexico, I have operations in South Africa, I have business in Turkey. So we have business in places where the currencies have dramatically weakened, and I had the experience in 2010 or so of watching 90% of our wealth in Argentina evaporate overnight, like literally overnight, just ripped from our hands, and there's nothing we can do about it. And it was a pretty painful experience then for me, even though it was not even 1% of our enterprise value. So at the end of the day, it was like getting poked in the arm really, really hard, or maybe breaking your arm. Like, it's enough that you remember the pain, but it wasn't debilitating for the company. But I try to imagine what it would be like. Yeah. What a chart.
That's yeah. I was just thinking about the first time I went to Turkey in 2010. I think it was like 1.5, and it's creeping up on 8 right now, and clearly on the way to 10.
Now imagine what would it be like if you had all of your life savings in Argentina and you lost 90% of them overnight. Okay, and at that point there was no Bitcoin, and so it was truly hopeless. I mean, honestly. If there was no Bitcoin and you're in one of those countries, it's hopeless. I had that, I have that funny story with Peter. I said, look, they came into my office in 2019 or so, and they said, it's happening again in Argentina. I said, can you buy some gold? No. Can you buy a yacht and sail it to the Caribbean? And my lawyers looked at me like I had gone nuts. And the finance people, they try to figure out how do we tell the CEO that he's out of his mind? And I'm like, I wasn't thinking Bitcoin. All I was thinking was, we're about to lose another couple $1 million or something. Buy a boat, put it in the water. It's already in the water. Sail it north, and is some politician going to reach out from heaven above and take 95% of my boat? I mean, and they go, well, we can't do that. And so a world without Bitcoin is literally hopeless. Like for those people, like you've got your 100 years life savings, everything your family's ever done, all your hopes, your aspirations, and you're about to lose it. It's some snarky comment, like, oh yeah, why don't you buy some stocks with it? You're not buying NASDAQ stocks with it when you don't have a stock market, right? You can't get the capital out of the country. You're not buying gold with it. You can't get it out of the country. I've lived that, and I lived that as a global multinational, and I had 100x the resources that anybody that lived in those countries has. And so Bitcoin really represents hope. And I'm aware that if you don't have a functioning exchange in the country, then you still run into a problem. So I'm pretty supportive of that. I kind of feel like as Bitcoin is more successful, the exchanges are more successful. We want to see people like Binance and all the other exchanges be successful so that they make money, so that they have capital, so that they go and they set up subsidiaries in all these countries so that they can allow people to exchange their property and their assets and their fiat in every place on earth for Bitcoin that will hold its tangible value, in the face of volatility and adversity.
I agree 100% with you about Bitcoin, providing hope in the world. And especially, like, I can't really even imagine, not living in my first world U.S., kind of privileged, view of things. I was still pretty hopeless about things. I kind of resigned to I'm just going to, live my life with my family, and we're going to, basically live without hope for a better monetary existence and even right to privacy and privacy issues. Bitcoin's really provided some hope on that front as well. So do you think at this point that Bitcoin is inevitable, and what does a Bitcoin future look like to you, if you could sum it up?
Well, I'll say this, right? Nothing is for certain on this earth. Nothing is inevitable, and that's why we have to get up every single day and do our jobs, right? You guys have to get up every day, and you have to do your job. I have to do my job. Every Bitcoiner has to do their job. We need the miners to do their job. The developers have to do their job, and on the day when everybody in the Bitcoin community thinks it's inevitable, we're done, and we're assured, we're probably no better than all the politicians and central bankers that we criticize, right? So I think that in nature, everything is at its finest when tomorrow is uncertain. Right? Every creature gets up in the morning and tomorrow is uncertain. And yet, having said all that, it's most beautiful when everything is struggling in order to maximize its potential. So I think that the future looks good for Bitcoin, and I think that it will succeed. But I think it will succeed because nobody in the Bitcoin community takes it for granted, and everybody gets up every single day and gives it their finest.
Love it. Love it. I think that's a perfect segue into our video celebrating our new Bitcoin philosopher on the scene, and the poetry you've been dropping. We gathered up some of your your clips, your tweets, and our creative director Brekkie put it into an awesome video. So we'll roll it right now. Sorry if we embarrass you just a little bit, but we wanted to share it with you.
have a mega problem. And the mega problem is I have a lot of cash and I'm watching it melt away. Under a good year for the past decade, the monetary supply expands by 7 to 8%. That's my battery draining by 8% a year. That's a good year. And this is not a good year for us, right? This is a year where you can make the argument that the battery is going to drain 25%. What is the point of all this?
Well, all right, technology prevented it, but it's on Twitter. So I got over 50,000 views. We put it up yesterday. People are loving it. So I'll DM it to you, and you can watch it. Unfortunately, the streaming didn't work this time.
I'll say for the record, I think you guys at Swan are the funnest group of podcasters, and you seem to enjoy your job or your life and Bitcoin more than anybody else I've actually seen podcasting. So yeah, I think that's a cool thing. I did see the video, somewhat embarrassed because again, the real hero is somewhere the debate between Satoshi and the early Bitcoiners like Hal Finney, and then everybody that fought that battle in 2017. And those are the guys that really struggled. I'm a Johnny-come-lately, but I'm happy to be part of the team, and I will do my part as much as I possibly can, and I'm coachable, and teachable. So you guys keep coaching me, keep me on the straight and narrow, and we'll all play our position and try to do the right thing for Bitcoin. Because as I said, it's a bunch of cyber hornets. I just want to be one of the hornets.
Well, Brekkie, he did see the video, so
there you go.
We'll just post a link in the comments for everybody.
Sure.
It's creative. I give you that.
Excellent.
If you're not having fun with Bitcoin, what are you doing? We gotta have.
I'll make one point for you guys, which I think is really the strength of Bitcoin, and this is the strength of the cyber hornets and the entire swarm, and decentralization. If I hired 100 people in marketing, and I gave them 3 months and told them to come up with some good marketing for Bitcoin, they would work with each other. They would come up with 1,000 ideas. They would put 10 in front of the executives. 82 would get knocked down by the lawyers. They would come up with something which is 1/100th as good as what you've done. It would cost 1 million times more money, and nobody would pay attention to it.
It's an organic, distributed marketing team, and it is fantastic. It is Twitter really is like this, a crucible for the best ideas, the best ways to present ideas, and the memes that will, go mainstream. Hopefully, and really teach people 3-word phrases. What the hell's going on here?
So
yeah,
this is
exciting.
Michael, this is going to sound cryptic, but it's actually extremely important for our company's strategy. If you are going to be an animal cartoon character, what animal would you be?
You already know what animal I want to be.
Okay.
Hornet.
He's the cyber hornet.
Cyber hornet.
That's what we thought. So we just wanted to make sure.
Look, with all due respect, I think there are a lot of brilliant metaphors moving through the entire Bitcoin community, but I don't want to be a mushroom, and I don't want to be a fungus. And I
don't know if you knew, but actually Brandon Quittem runs communications for Swan. So he actually writes all of our emails, and
he's brilliant. And I read it. Okay. Yeah. And I get it. Okay. And I agree with it. Right. It's just a question of what do I want on my t-shirt?
Right. Cyber hornet it is.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you,
All right.
guys.
Thank you, Michael. This was a ton of fun. I really appreciate it, man. We'll just drop it right there. Don't forget Swan Daily Buys, swanbitcoin.com/daily buys. It's rolling out now. Get hyped every single day. You can buy automatically. Just, hang out on Twitter, make up memes. Let us buy the Bitcoin for you. Thanks, everybody.